You're all very welcome to today's webinar. We're delighted to have so many aspiring Fulbrighters joining us today. My name is Emma Loughney and I'm the Communications Manager with the Fulbright Commission in Ireland. And today we're going to talk about the Fulbright Irish Student Awards. So these are opportunities that support Irish and EU students to undertake postgraduate study and research in the USA. And the competition for Fulbright Irish Awards opens August to November annually, but you can begin planning your application today. The Commission in Ireland strives to ensure that its programmes reflect and value the diversity of Irish and US societies, and equity steps to support this intent include the provision of online interviews for shortlisted candidates and assessment beyond academic aspects. And I can tell you a little bit more about that during the presentation. So during the webinar, we're going to give you an overview of the student awards on offer, information on supports and resources available, and advice on how to prepare for the application period. We'll hear from a panel of Fulbright alum who will talk to us about their experiences and any tips they have for applicants. And then we'll have time for a Q&A at the end. So if you do have any questions you'd like to put to myself or to any of the panel, please just type them in the chat box and we'll try to get to as many as possible at the end of the session. So shortly, I'll give an overview of the award opportunities, and I just want to give you a little bit of a glimpse of our panel first. So we'll have Oisín Kavanagh joining us, and he's a lecturer in pharmaceutics and School of Pharmacy at Newcastle University. As a PhD student at the Bernal Institute at the University of Limerick, he undertook a Fulbright Award to the University of Michigan. Patricia Kenney is a PhD candidate at UCD. Her current research, funded by the Irish Research Council, focuses on the use of unusual stone in European prehistoric societies. As a 2019 Fulbright Creative Ireland Museum Fellow, she continued her research on an international scale in the Department of Anthropology at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. David Monaghan is a postdoctoral researcher in the Department of Biomedical Engineering and Regenerative Medicine at NUI Galway. He completed his PhD there focusing on minimally invasive delivery strategies to treat heart disease. And on his Fulbright Award, he visited the Therapeutic Technology Design and Development Lab at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT. So we look forward to hearing from our alum speakers shortly. As I said, if you have any questions, pop them in the chat box and we'll try to get to them when we can. So now I have a short presentation. I just wanted to start off with a few pictures of our student alumni during their time in the US to give you a taster of their academic, professional and cultural experiences. So one of the first things you should know about the Fulbright program is that it differs in many ways from other grant programs, particularly in its emphasis on the Fulbright ethos. So this is the idea of bringing your knowledge and skills to the USA and sharing it with your colleagues there, then bringing what you learn back home to share with your colleagues and students here. So this includes the academic and professional expertise you gain, of course, but there's also a strong focus on the cultural element, seeing the country. We want Fulbrighters to act as ambassadors, to take the time to immerse yourselves fully in the culture of your host institution, your host state, to travel widely, to engage with the community there and to enjoy yourself. So please do bear that in mind throughout your application and when choosing where to go and formulating the essays you need as part of your application. So you can choose to go wherever you like through our all-discipline Fulbright Awards, and it's worth thinking outside the box. Many students choose to go to well-known universities to undertake their master's or research projects, but there are literally thousands of options. So we encourage you to explore diverse institutions and establish new Ireland-US connections, exploring roads less traveled. Researchers can go to higher education institutions, or you could choose to go to a cultural institution, a gallery, an arts museum, a science museum, or a research institute. These shots here are just of some of our alum, Jasmine and Andrew, Jasmine chose to go to the University of Hawaii on her Fulbright Award to work with a specialist investigating jellyfish venom, while Andrew's host institution was the San Diego Zoo Institute for Conservation Research, where he worked on their pioneering efforts to conserve global biodiversity. So there's just a couple of examples of Fulbrighters doing many interesting things in different places. And we'll hear, of course, from our alum panel shortly on how they chose their institutions. There's also lots of opportunity to engage with Fulbrighters from all over the world at Fulbright enrichment seminars and events while you're over there. There are Fulbright chapters in many states, and of course the Irish Embassy and the consulates also engage with Fulbrighters in country, so you'd be invited to their events, and our alum might touch on that later too. So now I'll just give you an overview of the presentation, sorry, of the Fulbright program itself. So there's a long legacy to the Fulbright program. Okay, it was started in 1946, just after World War II, and Senator Fulbright, his intention was to engage people all over the world, because he believed that educational exchange can turn nations into people, contributing as no other form of communication can to the humanizing of international relations. So that's the core really of the Fulbright ethos. So it's something to bear in mind as you go. Next slide, please, Sarah. So there are Fulbright opportunities for many people. Today's webinar, we're going to focus on students in particular, but we do have upcoming webinars for all other categories of awards too. Next one, please. So the awards themselves provide a monetary grant, visa administration, accident and emergency insurance, cultural and professional programming, and ongoing supports and links to a global network of Fulbright alums. So there are Fulbright programs in 180 countries around the world. So when you go to the US, you're engaging with US Fulbrighters and people from all over the world from those countries. And next slide, please. In addition to the monetary support and admin support, Fulbright really is an experience of a lifetime. So it's a lifelong commitment, but also achievement. And there's a lot of recognition there, particularly in the US. When you go over, our alum have all said, you know, it really opens doors for them being the Fulbrighter on campus. You know, they get introduced to many, many people. And it's a great network. It's also, there's a Fulbright family. So there's the Fulbright Association over in the States and the Fulbright Alumni Association here that we like to keep the network going and keep in touch with everyone. It's an opportunity to join global peers in your discipline and across all disciplines. Next slide, please. So firstly, just in terms of eligibility, the Irish Awards, Fulbright Irish Awards, are open to Irish citizens and to EU citizens who have been resident in Ireland for 5 or more years. You need to demonstrate a strong rationale for going to the US. I'll talk about a little bit about that later on. You must comply with the 2-year home rule visa requirement. So this is that you would come home from the US after your award. You can't stay on indefinitely in the US when you finish your Fulbright Award. You can't be a dual US-Irish citizen, you can't be living in the US at the time of application, and you can't have recent extensive experience of studying or living in the US. Now, if you've spent, you know, a summer in the US or a year or 2 in the US, you know, in the past, it's not the biggest deal. It's really if you've spent the last 4 out of 5 years in the US that you might not be eligible. Next slide, please. So in terms of the application process, we have a timeline on the next slide. Applications will open 31st of August, 2022. They close the end of October. Reviews will take place internally with the Fulbright Commission from November to December. And then you'll be offered interview to take up in February 2023. And then the offers for the actual awards will go out to successful candidates in March. So we've just reached out to our successful candidates for this year. If you're offered an award in March 2023, you know, you'll be starting anytime from August, September 2023. So what you can do from now is review information on our website. There's lots there. lots of alumni stories, as well as information on, specific information on the awards themselves. Choose an award. So most of you, if you're in the right place today, will be going for the Student Award, but you may need to make a decision whether you want to go for an All Discipline Award or a sponsored award. Find a course if you want to do research or plan, find a course if you want to do a master's program or PhD program, or plan your research proposal if you want to do research as part of a PhD program or independently. Research what it means to be a Fulbrighter. This is really important, and our alum will touch on that. And register your interest on Fulbright.ie. So if you have, by signing up to this webinar, you've joined our mailing list, so I can send you out some follow-up information after today's event. So again, we have a number of award categories available, but today we'll be concentrating on the Student Awards for postgraduate research or postgraduate degree programs. So the postgraduate, the awards, Student Awards in all disciplines are for visiting researchers or degree-seeking students. You need to establish affiliation. So if you're going to do research, you need to reach out to your host institution, choose your host institution and establish affiliation with them yourselves. Or if you want to go and do a degree course, a postgraduate degree course, you need to apply through the normal channels with that institution, as well as applying for your Fulbright application. The awards are for a minimum of 4 months and a maximum of 12 months. Obviously, if you're going to do a longer course, like a PhD, you can stay on after that, but your award, your Fulbright award proper will end at the end of the 12 months. The maximum monetary award for students is €30,000. This is tax-free, but it will depend on how long you're going for and what place you're going to. So that's the maximum amount. So if we go on to the next slide, you'll see that awards are individually assessed and based on a monthly maintenance rates. So the stipends will vary significantly depending on how long you're going for and your host location. We do have a number of equity steps in place to ensure that candidates can go on their awards. This includes the Fulbright Opportunity Fund, which all successful candidates are now eligible for in the last year or two, and the Mary McPartlin Bursary in memory of Fulbright Irish alumna and a renowned singer, producer, and mentor Mary McPartlin. This bursary is annually awarded to 2 recipients. So in terms of finding a host, if you're going through those all discipline awards, you need to think about who you want to work with. It's one of the most important things. So research experts in your field. Where is the best place for you to go? Who do you want to work with? Who do you want to learn from? We really welcome diversity. So think about that in terms of where you're going. You know, many people will choose to go to the very well-known universities or colleges, and that's absolutely fine. But we do welcome establishment of new connections, you know, so between your home university and your host university as well. So do think outside the box as well. Reach out to Fulbright Irish and US alum. We have over 1,000 US alum who are all scattered across the US in universities and institutions. So they're always happy to chat to Irish awardees, and similarly with Irish alumni here, they're happy to chat. Use existing links. So we have a number of sponsors that are happy to chat with awardees, and I'll talk about them, or sorry, with applicants. I'll talk about them in a second. Ask your mentors. A lot of your mentors will have been to the States for a stint, or might have colleagues who have been, so they'll have a wealth of knowledge, you know, so chat with them, ask them what they think of your proposal, your Fulbright proposal, if they have any tips, and they should be able to help you out. And then you can select your degree or choose your host institution. So make sure it makes sense to you. You know, why do you need to go to where you're thinking about it? What's your rationale? So in addition to the all discipline sponsored award, in addition to the all discipline awards, we have a number of sponsored awards available. So these sponsored awards are in partnership with a number of Irish and US institutions and agencies. So it's a separate funding pot essentially for these sponsored awards. And while our all discipline awards are very competitive, you know, we might have say 30 to 40 awardees across the categories each year. Some of the sponsored awards, because they're field specific, can be slightly, there might be less people applying for them because some of them can be niche. So if they are suitable for you, it's worth applying to a sponsored award as opposed to an all discipline award. So we'll go through them now, and just so you're aware of which ones might be appropriate for you. So there's an Enterprise Ireland Award in Innovation and Business, EPA Award in Water, Climate Change and Sustainable Development, and then GSI Award in Geoscience. We also have new student award, the Fulbright Frederick and Anna Douglas Award. We have the Creative Ireland Museum Fellowships, the Law Awards, and the Teagasc Awards. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about some of them now. So the new Fulbright Frederick and Anna Douglas Award was just founded last year in cooperation with the Frederick Douglass Family Initiatives to honour the legacy of Frederick and Anna Douglas. It was established with the goal of increasing participation of diverse communities in US and Irish exchanges. And it's an opportunity to complete a master's in civil rights or a related field in the US in a university of your choice. Proposals for doctoral programs or non-degree master's level research will also be considered, and you are encouraged to seek a host institution with a legacy of study in civil rights, social justice, or civil engagement. So that's a really exciting opportunity, and we're looking forward to announcing our first awardee of that specific award at our ceremony in June this year. The Fulbright Creative Ireland Museum Fellowships, then we have opportunities in the Harry Ransom Centre, the Exploratorium, or the Smithsonian. And Patricia Kenney, who's one of our speakers today, is going to be talking about her experience on a Creative Ireland Museum Fellowships. Each award has a specific eligibility criteria, so just make sure once the application period opens, please check back at the website. So from the end of August, check back on our website to look at the specific eligibility criteria for these sponsored awards, because sometimes, like, some of these awards will be open to people who have just completed a master's or just finished their undergrad, whereas others will only be for people doing PhDs. And these ones as well, you need to seek a letter of support from the host, so the specific host, and include that in your Fulbright application. Whereas with the all discipline awards, you do not need your letter of affiliation or support from the host institution by the application deadline, by our application deadline. I would suggest getting one if you can, because it is only positive to your application, but it's not essential for the all discipline awards, whereas it is for these museum fellowships. The Law Associate Awards. So these are great for any law students hoping to go and do a master's. Indiana and Notre Dame Law are offering a full tuition waiver for Irish Fulbright awardees, and Penn Law are offering a partial tuition waiver. So if you are planning to go and do a master's or PhD program, it's worth considering the costs. It can be very expensive to do a paid course. Obviously over there, some of the LLM courses can be, between upwards of $30,000 a year. So you need to think about how you're going to cover that. Some of our alum in the past have approached their host university of choice and said, listen, if I'm applying for a Fulbright Award, if I'm successful, would you consider a full or partial tuition waiver? And they have been successful, but that is up to you to do individually if you're going outside of these particular awards that we have that we're partners with the colleges. And next slide, please. There are a number of other associate awards for PhD opportunities. Florida Poly and USC offer partial or full tuition waivers for their masters and some of their research programs as well. There are a number of things you need to include in your application. We'll go through some tips on these with our alum. The personal statement and the project statement are probably the bulk of it, but also your recommenders. You can get started on that now. You need 3 recommenders. So get chatting to people, to your mentors, to your lecturers, whoever it is you want to act as reference for you. Next slide, please. For the study or research objectives, this is your project proposal. Really start thinking about why your work is groundbreaking, your rationale for going to the US, and think about the areas you want to concentrate on in your fields, your objectives and your expected results. And really importantly, what impact this will have, not just on you, but also on your discipline, on your career, on the wider field, your wider field and the community as well. And then your personal statement is really, really important. Again, you need to be bearing in mind the Fulbright ethos. You need to talk about you personally. We really want to hear about your ambitions, your passion for what you do, your motivations. If you have overcome obstacles in your journey to date, we want to hear about them. We want to hear about why you strive to do what you're doing. And we want to hear that you understand the role and the benefit of being a Fulbrighter, okay? And we'll talk about that lots more. Next slide, please. So that element is really important to bear in mind as well for your interview. So basically there's a technical review once you submit your application, technical reviews, and that's pretty much weighted on your academic record and your project statement. Okay, so it's your record to date, and then also the viability of your project, whether it's reasonable that you could do it within the time frame you suggest, whether it's groundbreaking, things like that. And then part of it is the cultural engagement and leadership, but then that flips around if you make it to interview, and there is a really strong focus on your cultural engagement and leadership skills and potential. So a number of resources to help you prepare for those are Fulbright ambassadors. We have Fulbright ambassadors around the country. So please check our website to see if there's one on your campus. We have lots of videos and testimonials on our website and YouTube channels. We have Fulbright events coming up throughout the year. Also touch base with your research or international department at your institution, your higher education institution, or your, if you're at a museum or something like that, if there's any research staff that can help you there. We also have a number of Fulbright affiliate groups. These groups can be very supportive for Fulbrighters from application right through to your Fulbright experience, like on the ground. And we do welcome candidates from underrepresented communities, areas of research, home organizations, geographical areas, ethnicities, and abilities. So everybody's journey, I suppose, like professional, academic journey, is very different. So, make sure that you talk about your experience in your personal statement. And if you want to reach out to anybody, these groups are on Twitter, all across our social media, the Fulbright wider social media network. There's Fulbright Noir, Fulbright Latinx, Fulbright Prism, Fulbright Access, Fulbright Families, lots of different support groups that you can reach out to if you have any concerns about, when you arrive on the ground in the US, or, putting your application together. So please do engage with them. Next slide. Lastly, there is also the Fulbright Schumann Awards are available to Irish and EU students. They have a different application date. They open in December, and they're run by our colleagues in the Fulbright Belgian Commission. So you can bear them in mind if those, if EU relations policy or EU affairs are relevant to you. So in terms of next steps, we'd recommend reaching out to recommenders, thinking about selecting your host institution, researching the Fulbright ethos, talking to as many Fulbrighters as you can, and follow us on our social media channels. So having gone through those elements, I want to now invite our alumni panel, who are very generously joining us today, to have a bit of a chat about their experiences in the US. So we have today with us Oisin, Patricia, and David. So I suppose the first question would be, how did you decide where to go in the US? So there's so many options, it's wide open. What made you decide where to go? So maybe if we start with David, please.
Hey everyone. So I guess I decided to go to my institution because we had a collaboration with the lab that I went over to. And basically, the way it usually worked is that they were in a very heavily engineering focused lab, whereas we do the biological aspect. So they'd usually develop the medical devices, and then we'd usually test them to see how they work in the body. And I guess from my point of view, I wanted to learn how the engineering side worked, how the medical device side worked. And they were really the leading experts in the world on this. So that's kind of how we had an existing collaboration. And that really helped. And, getting to learn other experts going over there was really, really important for my PhD.
Excellent. So you would have were working closely with your lecturers and your kind of research department at NUIG to kind of work on those relationships as well.
Yes, exactly. So I would have reached out to the professor that I worked with and just asked would they be interested in hosting, and it just worked out great.
Right. And like when you're thinking of applying, and I'm sure a lot of people who are on the call today, might be thinking, oh, is it the right time, or is my work at the right place for this? Does speaking to your mentors like that kind of help ease any of those anxieties, and is it just about taking the first step and reaching out?
Yeah, definitely. It's like just a matter of reaching out, talk to our mentors about it. Like, is it the correct time during your research to go over? And you want to learn something when you're over there as well. So, figure out something that lab can do that your lab can't do, that's really going to add to your project. Like, from my point of view, I know how to make medical devices now. I had no clue how I would even begin making a medical device beforehand, but I got to learn with these engineering teams how to do that. And it just turned out that it would have worked great for my project because we end up developing a whole new device and everything over there. So it was brilliant to get that skill set.
Amazing. That's under a year, basically, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's great.
Amazing. Great. Okay, and what about you, Patricia? So you went to on a Creative Ireland Museum Fellowship.
Yeah, so I went to the Smithsonian, excuse me, sorry. I went to the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., the Museum of Natural History. And really for me, I was really interested in this particular researcher's work on the folklore that Native Americans have associated with fossils. And as an archaeologist, I was thinking, oh, can you trace this through time? Can you look at this in prehistory? Is it available in any museums? Like, are there collections that I could look at? So I reached out to the author and I was asking her about her research, and she said, well, there's a lot of fossil artifacts in the Smithsonian. So I was talking. There's actually there was another Fulbrighter in my department at the time, and I was talking about this at lunch one time, and he was like, Patricia, you need to look into this Fulbright Smithsonian program. So I did, and after that, it's a matter of going through, if you decide to go for the museum fellowship, the Smithsonian Institute is like huge. There's so many different museums that you could go for. So you need to kind of go through the different museums. I was looking at the Natural History and the National Museum of the American Indian were the two that I was looking at. And you just need to reach out to people in those museums and see which one would be the best fit for you, because they do have a lot of different kind of branches.
Yeah, they'd have like some with more science focus, some with the more kind of art, cultural focus. Yeah. And so Patricia, for you, even though you went through the sponsored award route, where there's kind of a step-by-step, like you have to submit, an application through the contact we have on our website, but you had already sought out an expert in the field who had kind of guided you towards them.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, excuse me. When I first started thinking about doing a Fulbright, I was wondering whether I would go for kind of the sorry, I don't know the title of the main Fulbright, I suppose, but I didn't know whether
all disciplines basically.
Yeah. I didn't know which one I would go for. And it was on talking to that Adrienne Mayer, she kind of suggested that like there's a lot to do in the Smithsonian, and that might be a really interesting one, as opposed to going to a specific university and trying to work at it that way. So yeah, I mean, it's all about kind of just like don't like I found it really helpful to just reach out to people, and it's kind of nerve-wracking because obviously you don't know these people, you've never met them, but just sending emails and tell people who you are and why you're interested, and you know, most people will get back to you and be friendly about it.
Just take the leap.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
and what about you then, Aisling? What was your kind of initial step like in terms of finding a host organization?
It was very much the same as Patricia and David. I was actually, it was the same as a lot of people really, I think, that I've met. I just reached out, and it was, you know, one of these people that I was reading a lot of her papers, and just by chance, she was at a conference, and I just went, right, I'm going to just go up and have a chat and see. And we sort of got along, and we talked about possibly visiting the lab, and it's like, okay, so how do I get there? And Fulbright was a tool really to help me sort of make the transition over. So yeah, no, and I think the point that Patricia made there is a good one in terms of just send an email. And, you know, if they have the capacity to take you into the lab, if they, you know, are nice people, they're going to get back to you. And, you know, that's going to be positive confirmation, and it's going to set the cycle off. But yeah, I don't have any sort of specific advice, just to reach out, and most people are nice, and we'll get back to you.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. And I should point out as well, our three alum speakers today all were doing research, but of course you can go to do a master's program as well. And there are loads of testimonials from our alum who've gone to do a master's, whether it be in law or any discipline. So there's lots of stories there if you do wish to investigate that more. That's obviously you would apply to the course directly, and it's pretty straightforward with the university, so you wouldn't have to establish affiliation as such because you're just applying directly to them. We just had a question there in the chat box: can Fulbright be awarded to a candidate before their PhD is complete? Yes, so the student award category that we're talking about today is for people who have not finished their PhD. So if you finish your PhD before the application date, you'd be going for a scholar award category. That's a different award category. But you can apply to do part of your PhD or a master's through the student awards. Somebody else asking, could you do your placement in May or June 22-23? We wouldn't recommend usually going in the summer for two reasons. Firstly, on campus, there mightn't be a lot of people around to kind of for your experience during the summer, but also in terms of we do your visa administration, things like that, and we have our award ceremony in June. So the absolute earliest you'd be able to go would be August. If you wanted to go during the summer, if there was rationale for going to summer, you'd be going the tail end of the year, if you get me. Okay, so we'll move on to, I suppose, tips on application. So I know we've discussed before that some people, like, your project statement is your project statement. You're outlining what you want to do, your objectives, whether that's for study or research, and your desired outcomes. But what about your personal statement? How did you guys find tackling that, talking about you personally rather than just your work? Any tips for applicants on those? Anyone?
I guess be honest, you know, and try to be authentic, and try to tell the person that's reading your application why you're passionate about the subject. From the personal statement point of view, so there's personal statement and there's the project statement, but in the personal statement, definitely focus on you, what you bring to the table, you know, why you're excited about the project, what kind of things, you know, the Fulbright experience are going to do to help you in your career. And then finally and this is an important aspect in sort of Fulbright philosophy really, is what are you going to do with that knowledge when you come back home, right? You know, they talk about this two-year home rule, you know, there's a reason, and you're supposed to bring that knowledge back home and disseminate it, and, you know, don't spend too much of the application, but a small portion, should be focused on that and discussing that in your own specific area.
Absolutely. Thank you, Oisin. That's a really important aspect of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree with Oisin and everything he said there, but I'd also like to add that it's, especially for the personal statement, it's a very different kind of writing to what you're kind of used to in academia. You'd really have to sit down and reflect on who you are, and why, like what experiences have you had in your life that made you who you are today, and what motivates you. And I think that's a very, very important aspect. But one thing about Fulbright as well, it's more than just a research exchange. There's so many scholarships you can apply for different academic societies, but Fulbright is one of the only ones, I'd say, that really, really promotes the cultural aspect. So think of more about, like, beyond what you want to do in terms of your research, like what you want to learn from your cultural experience, what do you want to learn from the US and from going abroad. So I think that's a very important thing to reflect on during the essays. And I'd say with the research essays as well, in academia, you can get very specific in a topic. So you kind of want to keep it broad enough that someone in your field will understand it, like an engineer or a biologist or a historian will understand it. But you don't want to go into too much detail where it's too complex for the reviewer as well. So that's something I'd add. You kind of want to have a nice balance of keep it simple that anyone can understand it, but at the same time, you want to highlight your importance of the essays.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a really good tip. And also, at interview stage as well, you'd be asked to kind of do your elevator pitch, I suppose, too, because if you make it to the interview stage, the panel won't necessarily be from your field at all. So you could be talking, if you're from talking about, treatments for heart disease, you could be talking to an artist about it, so you're really going to have to condense your message and convey your passion for it, like you would, if you're chatting to a stranger at a conference, when you get over to the States. So that's that's a skill in itself, really, isn't it? And something you probably really refine during the application process. And how about you, Patricia?
Yeah, so this was actually probably the part of the application that I hated the most, was the personal statement, because it's not something that I really like doing, is, talking about who I am, how I've got here, and all of that sort of thing. But something that I'd like to stress is that, like, the passion is the word that keeps coming up, right? Like, you do need to highlight that. And what I found helpful was to think about how I got interested in this and why, and then to share those anecdotes. Like, that's fine in a personal statement, and you can kind of link that in then to what you're doing now and what you want to do in the States, and how you think that you'll be able to bring that home and benefit others, I suppose. And actually, just to tag on to what Oisin was saying about what you're doing when you get home and how it's going to, benefit your discipline and all of that. Look and see if there are any, so for example, when I was doing it, they had released it several years ago, but they had this thing called Archaeology 2020, and it was kind of the goals for the discipline by 2020. And that was something that I linked into in that final section, because I wasn't sure what to do. So I looked at what the goals for my discipline were, and I said, oh, actually, this project feeds into XYZ. So that can be the sort of thing that is helpful there.
Excellent. Yeah. And would you also say that having someone cast an eye over your essays would be helpful?
100%, actually.
Yeah.
So I was really fortunate in that my cubicle mate in the PhD office was a former Fulbrighter, and I just plagued him with questions. The poor man. But yeah, do try to get other people to look over your application. Definitely, I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, and one of actually the nice things is that generally in the Fulbright community, most Fulbrighters enjoy their experience so much that they are very happy to help you, in terms of just give a few little tips. They might not have time to look over your essays for you, but they can, meet you for coffee or have a phone call or something like that, a couple of emails about what they found helpful. So do reach out. And if it's not, Fulbrighters can be very helpful, but also to like your lecturers, your colleagues, anyone who spent a bit of time in the States can all help too. I just have a few more little questions you might address as we go, so they don't pile up. Now, somebody was saying that their PhD is based on the Irish healthcare system. So does your project proposal have to be based on that topic? Well, for example, then, Patricia, I think your PhD research is about European kind of aspects, isn't it? But you managed then to weave in the Native American kind of aspects. So it's making things work essentially, isn't it? And you can do compare and contrast and things like that. How did you find, Patricia, was it something you had always envisioned at the start of your PhD, working on that kind of Native American folklore aspect, or did you weave it in as your kind of ideas, kind of evolved?
Yeah, so originally, I mean, within archaeology, it's very common to, particularly when you're looking at prehistory, it's common to look at sort of different societies around the world, because every society will do things differently. And having that and kind of past assemblages. So it was something that I hadn't originally planned from the beginning, but through the course actually of the Fulbright application, it became clear how I could link the two together. And I mean, to be honest with you, it is linked into my PhD thesis, but it's also entirely different, because obviously you've got two very, very different cultures. So they're related, and I refer to actually what I learned there in my PhD thesis, but it's not it's not like completely clamped together, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I would say it doesn't have to be like,
yeah, it's not rigid. And I know from a lot of people, talking to a lot of alumni, they say even when they're over, their work evolves a lot, like that you have a specific project proposal in mind and what you plan to do, but then the people you meet and the people you're working with make things kind of evolve a little bit, and that's absolutely fine. Like, that's part of the process, really. And another person just asked in the chat box, would a master's application differ from a research or PhD application in terms of, in terms of personal statement and objective statement? So the objective statement, obviously, if you're applying for a program, it will be different to a research proposal in the way that you lay it out. But you will still need to say like what your objectives are, what you want to focus on, what your hope your outcomes would be. Then the personal statement would be, again, it's just about you, and why you're passionate about your work. So that would be fairly similar, I would say. But having said that, everyone's personal statement is going to be completely different from the next person. So so I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of cultural immersion, any surprises you had, what you enjoyed the most about the cultural aspects of your Fulbright Award. So does anyone have any stories? David, actually, I know you gave us some photos that I showed at the start of you kayaking, enjoying, and I know you were saying yourself and Oisin met up at one of the Fulbright events over there. So can you tell us a little bit about that element?
Yeah, so from a cultural point of view, I did learn a lot, and I think just living abroad in another country, you do learn a lot of different things. And like, America is a much more diverse place than Ireland, I'd say, because I met people I would have never met before. Like, my housemate was from Peru, for example. I had friends from literally everywhere in Boston. But when we went on that Fulbright program, I think there was people from over 50, 60 countries when me and Oisin went on. And like, I literally made friends from all over the world. It was one of the best experiences I ever done, because you get to talk to people you would never come in contact with before. Like, I had friends from all over South America. I was talking to people from like Australia, different parts of Asia, and just like, you'd be in groups together and you would be talking and just understanding people's backgrounds. You do really learn a lot from a cultural aspect, not just about US culture, but Fulbright is a very close-knit community. Like every city nearly has a local Fulbright chapter, and you know, it's not just Irish people going over there, it's you literally have people from 180 countries. So the amount of people you're exposed to, and the amount of, like, I still chat to a lot of the people I've met over there, and it was just great from a cultural aspect. I learned a lot about not just US culture, but everywhere. So yeah, that would have been the big thing.
Great. And what about you, Oisín, then? Did you got to go to that same enrichment seminar?
Yeah, no, it was good crack. Like, you know, the I guess the best parts of it are if there's any sort of moments where you can kind of meet up with the other Fulbrighters. That sort of tends to be a really fun time, because obviously you'll be surrounded by Americans, but when you meet up with the Fulbrighters, you everyone's got this kind of same personality, and everyone wants to crack. And you know, that night in Pittsburgh, we ended up in some pub in Pittsburgh, this place, and it was just, there was mostly about 60 of us. We all went in, and it was probably the last night out before COVID hit. And obviously the pub was called Howling at the Moon. So there was a good bit of that done. And yeah, it was good fun. Yeah, I can't, there's so many experiences, you know. There's a lot of good memories, but one of the things people say is say yes to everything. And I can't stress that enough. And, you know, when you come back home, then you sort of start to carry that over a wee bit, and you sort of start to realize that, you know, you have a lot more fun that way. But yeah.
That's good. And so then in terms of living there, I suppose as well, like, is there anything, you know, that kind of was a surprise to you, or even, or again, like tips in terms of when people are thinking about where to go, and just the experience of living there? Because going on holidays somewhere for a couple of weeks is very different to spending the guts of a year there, really.
I think practically everyone got a Revolut card. And I think that was a really, really important practical point of view. I think it depends on your scholarship, and it depends on if you're a Fulbright Irish person. I know the Fulbright Irish language guys, they had a little bit more difficulty because they had to do their tax returns and this kind of thing. And you'll have to do that if you make any money in America. But if you're a student and you go and you're, you know, doing your PhD, then you don't really have to worry about that too much. In terms of the cost of things, it's relatively similar to Ireland, I would say. If you just, you know, imagine dollars to euro, you know, you're roughly spending, you know, $2.50 for a coffee, or, you know, this kind of thing. You can expect your rent, depending on where you're living, to be about $1,000 a month and that sort of thing, you know. And I think in Ireland people are probably used to that now. But yeah, I don't know. Would you guys think there's anything? Tipping, I suppose, is a big thing, and you sort of start to get into that. But you know, other than that, I can't really think of. David, Patricia, what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely think the tipping was it was something that it took a while to kind of get used to over there. And I personally found things a lot more expensive in Boston. But like I think it depends on what city you go to, because Boston's quite an expensive place to go to, and if you're kind of on the east or west coast, that's where it is going to be more expensive. And one thing I would mention is that some universities will charge a fees, as Emma was mentioning, but like I kind of had a little panic before I went over. I was like, I thought the fees were free, and then they told me like, oh, it's like $3,000 a semester or something. But once I went over there, it was all waived. And once I talked to them about it, but just be aware that depending on the university you're in, there might be fees associated. But everyone I've talked to, it's gotten waived, but that doesn't mean that's going to be the way in every case. So from practical sense, I just keep an eye on that.
Exactly, yeah, and it's worth, you know, when you're reaching out, I suppose, as well, to check that, as well as, you know, to check that they have the resources that you want. You know, if you need, you know, if you're not working in a lab, you need an office space or something like that, or you need access to certain things, you know, to kind of not in your first email, but in your follow-up emails, make sure there's somebody there that can be your contact, that you will have access to what you need. And then also check, because definitely the bigger universities, there are research fees attached. So you just don't want that to surprise you. Hopefully, they'll find a way to waive it for you. In that way, Fulbright does open doors, but it is your responsibility to do that. So you don't, just check it out before, as early as you can, to see what your options are, because it also might help you decide if you're between, 2 or 3 different host institutions and you're not sure which one, that could be the clincher, And what about you, Patricia? Was there anything else you wanted to comment just on the kind of living in the US?
Yeah, I actually found it kind of difficult to find a place to live because I wasn't attached to a university. I think it was a little bit more like Washington, D.C., I think, isn't really set up for the kind of short-term lease that I was looking for, because I was there for 4 months. So I actually went through Airbnb, which is a good option. I think it's reasonably, like, I got a reasonably priced place for it. So I would say look into that if you're really struggling, or if you're going for one of those sponsored awards, it might be easier. But also, like, ask your mentor what accommodation is like there, and if they know of anything, because they might be able to help you. And also, I had an experience with Revolut. It really saved me. My bank, for some reason, canceled my card without letting me know because of unusual activity in the States. I was like, well, I'm here. But having that Revolut card really saved me, because I was able to manually transfer money across from my bank account to the Revolut card. So that is something I would definitely recommend, and have an emergency stash of cash just in case.
Yeah, okay, that seems to be like a top tip, for money management. And somebody was actually asking, is rent covered? So for the student awards, you get your stipend and you can spend it on whatever it is you need to spend it on. For those FLTA awards, the language teaching awards that Oisin mentioned, you met some of the FLTAs there, it's different. They have accommodation built into there. But for these student awards we're talking about today, you would just get your stipend amount agreed, that be offered to you when you're made a successful awardee, and you spend that on whatever you need to spend it on. So that could be, if you're going to do masters and you need to put some of it towards the fees, or you're putting it towards your accommodation, whatever it is, you decide on that. Somebody was saying, if you're currently in receipt of tax-free stipend, will this affect what you will receive from Fulbright? Not from our side, so you might need to just check with your other stipend provider, but it shouldn't do. The only conflict I ever heard of was somebody was in receipt of research for a PhD, and they had already factored their trip to the US into their proposal for that PhD, and then they were applying for Fulbright as well, and there was a little bit of conflict. That was the only one kind of thing that I had heard that there was a little bit of conversation about. So just check with your current stipend provider just to make sure, but it shouldn't be an issue. I think there was just one more here. Somebody in their final year of PhD, can they go next year? So basically, if you've submitted for your PhD before the time of application, you can't apply, because it's supposed to be, if you're applying as a student, you're supposed to be doing the research as part of your PhD. So if you've already submitted, there's a clash there. So you'd need to wait then until you're eligible for a scholar award when you've been awarded your PhD. Can you apply to both the all disciplines and then a specific award? No, if you're eligible for a sponsored award, if that's suitable for you, you'd apply for that. And if our sponsored award partners don't think you're suitable for that one for some reason, then you would be considered for an all discipline award. So you can't really lose with that. Okay, so we only have a few more minutes left. Time is flying. I could chat to you guys all day. But I just wanted to ask, I suppose, the last question, talk about like the impact that the award has had on you. So in terms of, I suppose, you personally, like your confidence in what you do, the connections you made, maybe even like connections from your home institution, host institution. Can you tell me a little bit about what that's looked like so far in the last while since you've been back? Who wants to take that one? The big one.
Yeah, so from my point of view, I definitely learned a lot of skills, as I mentioned, in terms of the engineering impact, but beyond making strengthening the collaborations with MIT, because I still collaborate with those at the minute. Even though I'm in a completely different lab at the moment, we still continue to work together. When I was in MIT, I got to reach out to their collaborators. So you're not just going to your collaborators lab, you can make contact with your collaborators. So I work with teams in the University of Washington, St. Louis now as well, on a medical device that we work on. And, you know, so from that point of view, I'm continuing on collaborations into my own research career, which is a great thing to have. So that'd be one thing. And then you just learn a lot of skills. Like I brought a lot of my engineer. I'm currently working in an engineering department now, whereas previously in a biology department. So I've definitely learned a lot of things I can apply onto that and continue in collaborations. And I just think overall you do learn a lot more confidence in your research about reaching out to people. And I think just being a Fulbrighter in the US, like in Ireland, people of course know about Fulbright, but if you're a Fulbrighter in America, everyone's like amazed that you're doing Fulbright. Like it's the best thing ever. So if you ever wanted to go back to the US, it's a really, really good thing to have. Yeah,
I think so. Great. And actually, I suppose, well, like we were discussing about like that initial email to send out to say like, oh, would you host me? You know, do you feel like now you just shoot an email off to anyone, you're like, oh, it's grand, like the confidence to do that kind of thing?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that's the thing. People usually in academia are more than willing to help out. So if you reach out to someone, if you don't know something or someone has a technique or you want to collaborate with someone, you know, it does open a lot of doors for you in terms of confidence point of view, just being able, like just showing that reaching out to people can really help your career.
Excellent. Cool. And what about you, Patricia and Oisín, on that? The impact?
Yeah, I suppose sort of related to that. I mean, yeah, it's obviously the research is tied into my thesis, and I have been talking to my mentor over there about maybe working on some other collaborations together. But the main thing for me was that I went from a university where I kind of knew everybody and everybody's from a similar cultural background and stuff like that to the Smithsonian, where everybody has quite a different just cultural, I guess, work ethic and things like that. And it was really like, I had to be the one who was like, hey, let's go for lunch, let's do this. And being forced to make friends in a place where you don't know anybody will just give you so much confidence in any other social situation. I found that like, I don't like get half as nervous at like any sort of, event anymore. I'm just, well, you just need to go talk to people. So that's I would say the main personal benefit for me.
Yeah,
I've noticed so far.
Amazing. So like life skills, like real life skills, like forever. Yeah, that's cool. And what about you, Oisín?
I guess just as David said, the collaboration which is established really at Michigan. We're still working together. We're still writing papers together. We just submitted a paper last month and that sort of thing. So in terms of a career point of view, definitely really, really helpful. And, the chance to get out and actually visit the lab, face to face and meet people, these kind of form the strongest sort of collaborations. Sure, you can do it over email, but it's nice to get the visit and it's been great.
Excellent. Yeah, because that's the thing, isn't it, as well? We've done so much obviously online as we're doing now, but the in-person bit, like you really, when you can get to know people on the ground, I think those collaborations can be really lasting. Like you're building the personal relationship as well. And then you're also having the kind of cultural experience that you'll discuss so eloquently. You make me want to go over to the US myself. I haven't been over in years now. But yeah, I think as well, the confidence I hear from alum a lot, like your personal confidence, your professional confidence just builds up so much. And then the opening up doors in terms of, as David was saying as well, like you're not just working with your host, you're working with their collaborators as well. And those connections go on and on and on. So thank you so much to all of them. I can't believe a half an hour has flown by chatting to you already. But we better let everyone go back to their work. But thank you so much, Oisín, Patricia and David, for joining us today and for all you do, because you've all shared your stories with us before for Fulbright, and we're in touch with you all the time as part of the Fulbright alum community. But I want to thank you so much for joining us today. And I want to thank everyone who attended. I hope you learned lots. And I hope you'll stay in touch and learn more about the Fulbright program in the build up to our awards launch in August. We'll have more webinars coming up during that September, October period when the applications open. So please do check back on the website, and we'll have a step-by-step kind of walkthrough of the application then. And in the meantime, you can have a look on our website, fulbright.ie. Sarah might pop that into the chat box just so you have it. You can visit us there and read more about the Fulbright ethos and all of the different award categories. Some of the awards will need to be updated. That'll happen by the 31st of August when the launch takes place. So thank you very much again. I just want to also mention, if I hadn't before, that by registering for this webinar, you're on our mailing list now. You can unsubscribe at any time, but we will be sending you some further information unless you unsubscribe. So I'll leave it at that, and thank you so much again. Any questions, send them in to info or awards@fulbright.ie is probably your best contact, awards@fulbright.ie. But thank you so much again to our speakers and everyone for joining today. And we look forward to talking to you again soon. Have a nice afternoon, everybody.